I used to think I was thinking for myself. Seriously. I'd read opposing arguments. I'd seek out different perspectives. I thought I was the type of person who actually thinks critically. Not like everyone else just accepting what they're told. I was different. And then I realized something. I was defending something I'd never actually examined. I just inherited it. And I was using every ounce of my intelligence to rationalize why I was right. Which means, if I was doing this, and I'm not stupid, then maybe the problem isn't stupidity. Maybe it's something else entirely. Here's what I want you to think about. You probably know someone who's intelligent, really intelligent, like they can argue their position from every angle. They've read extensively. They can cite sources. They understand complexity. And yet, they believe something that makes no sense. They defend it against all evidence. They rationalize away contradictions. And the more you point out the problems, the more defensive they get. And you're sitting there thinking, how is this person so smart and so wrong? I used to think those people were just broken, intellectually deficient somehow. But here's the thing that changed everything for me. What if they're not stupid because they think badly? What if they're stupid because they stop thinking independently? And what if, and this is the part that kept me up at night, what if I'm doing it too, and I just can't see it? That question haunted me. So I went looking for an answer. I found this guy, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, German theologian, lived through Nazi Germany. And he wrote something that describes exactly what I was experiencing. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase, he said that stupidity isn't random. It's not genetic. It's not a character flaw some people are born with. Stupidity is manufactured. It's created by systems of power. Here's what he actually wrote. Every strong rise of power in the public sphere, whether political or religious, infects a large part of humanity with stupidity. Think about that for a second. He's not saying bad people become powerful and then corrupt good people. He's saying power itself, the structure of it, the hierarchies it creates. Power creates stupidity in the people around it. And that's the part I couldn't unsee once I understood it. So here's the mechanism. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. When you enter any kind of hierarchical system, a corporation, a government, a church, a movement, a community, a friend group with a power dynamic, you face a choice. Option 1. You maintain your independence, which means constantly questioning authority, constantly risking your position, being the person who says, I'm not sure about this, when everyone else has certainty, being difficult, being alone sometimes. Option 2. You surrender it, which means safety. You fit in. You belong. You advance. Your life becomes easier. Your brain is literally designed to prefer safety. Evolution built you to want belonging. So most people choose option 2. And here's the crucial part. The moment you do, something shifts in how you think. Not obviously, not consciously, but implicitly, you start learning which questions are allowed, which facts can be discussed, which interpretations are acceptable in your group. And because you're intelligent, because you're actually smart, you don't experience this as constraint. You experience it as clarity. You think you're being realistic, understanding context, not being naive. But what you've actually done is surrender your independence. And the worst part? You don't realize it's happened. Let me show you exactly how this happens, because understanding the progression is everything. Most people don't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to stop thinking independently and start defending my group's ideology. It's incremental. It's subtle. Stage 1. Proximity. You encounter a group or a movement or an ideology that resonates with you. It has ideas you actually believe in, people you genuinely like, a sense of purpose. This is normal. This is healthy. You're supposed to connect with communities and ideas. Nothing wrong here. Stage 2. Belonging. You start spending more time with the group. Your friends come from it. Your identity starts connecting to it. You feel understood in a way you didn't before. Still normal. This is how humans work. But then, stage 3 happens. And this is where I want you to pay attention, because this is the threshold. You encounter something that contradicts the group's worldview. It could be a fact you discover, could be a policy the group supports, could be something a group leader does. And in that moment, you have clarity. Your independent mind says, that doesn't add up. You see the contradiction. It's right there. This is the moment everything changes. You have a choice. Do you voice the concern? Do you say, hey, I don't think this works? Or do you keep quiet? Most people keep quiet, and not because they're afraid of intellectual argument, not because they can't defend their position logically. They keep quiet because the cost of speaking up isn't abstract. The cost is social exile. It's identity dissolution. It's potentially economic consequences. It's losing your community. Your brain does the calculation instantly, and it decides, this independent thought isn't worth losing my place. So you suppress it. But here's the psychological trick, and this is the part that's so insidious. You don't suppress it consciously. You rationalize it away. You find intellectual reasons why you were wrong, why the group's perspective actually makes more sense, why you were being naive or not understanding the full context. And because you're intelligent, these rationalizations are convincing, to yourself anyway. You tell yourself a story, and it feels true. Now you've entered stage 4, defense. You don't just accept the group's view anymore. You actively defend it. You interpret new information through the lens of group loyalty. You become hostile to contradictory evidence. If someone questions the group, you feel personally attacked. And if you're very intelligent, if you're the type of person who can think clearly, you become a sophisticated defender. You can cite sources. You can construct logical arguments. You can make the indefensible sound reasonable. You've become the group's intellectual weapon. And here's the thing. You're not aware you've surrendered your independence. You feel like you're thinking more clearly than ever. Because you are thinking, just not freely. You're thinking within the permitted boundaries. Stage 5. Total integration. Your identity is completely fused with the group. Your thoughts are group thoughts. Your interests are group interests. Your values are group values. And if you're in a position where other people listen to you, if you have influence, you now have the authority to enforce this thinking on others. This is how intelligent people become tools of systems. And the terrifying thing? I can trace myself through those 5 stages. I can see the exact moment I hit stage 3. I can remember rationalizing in stage 4. I can feel how my identity got caught up in the ideology. And what made it worse is that I thought I was exempt. I thought I was too smart for this, too aware. But that's the trap. The people most caught in systems are often the ones who think they're thinking freely, because they are just within invisible walls they've built themselves. Now here's where Bonhoeffer says something that sounds almost cruel. He said, evil people are actually easier to deal with than stupid people. Think about that. Evil people know what they're doing. They've made a conscious choice to cause harm. You can reason against evil. You can expose it. You can predict its moves, because evil operates from rationality. Twisted, corrupted rationality, but rationality nonetheless. But stupid people, the people Bonhoeffer's talking about, the people who've surrendered their independence, you can't reason with them. Facts don't work. Logic doesn't work. Exposure doesn't work. And not because they're intellectually incapable of understanding, but because they're not operating from a failure of intellect. They're operating from a surrendered will. They didn't choose stupidity through ignorance. They chose it by prioritizing belonging over truth. And at some deep level, they know this. So when you present them with evidence, something interesting happens in their brain. They don't process it as information. They process it as a threat to their identity, to their group, to their sense of belonging. So they reject it. Not because they can't understand it, but because accepting it would mean accepting exile. You can't argue someone out of a social position they're afraid to lose. I tried this once. I had evidence, real, solid evidence, that contradicted someone's core belief. I presented it carefully, respectfully, with genuine curiosity. And the response wasn't intellectual disagreement. It was anger, defensiveness, accusations that I was being disrespectful, that I didn't understand, that I was naive. But underneath all that, what I was really hearing was, "You're threatening my place. You're making me choose between you and my community," and they chose their community. Because that choice, the one I was forcing them to make, is terrifying. It means accepting exile. It means rebuilding your identity from scratch. It means being alone. Most people will defend the indefensible rather than face that. This is why polarization gets worse, not better, when you present evidence. You're not fighting their intellect, you're fighting their sense of belonging. And belonging matters more to human brains than truth. Always. So here's where I have to get uncomfortable. Because it's easy to see these patterns in other people. It's much harder to see them in yourself. And the moment I understood Bonhoeffer's theory, I started asking myself, where am I doing this? Where am I defending something I haven't independently examined? Where is my intelligence being used to rationalize rather than to think? And I found 3 places where I'm caught. The first one, my creative philosophy. There's a school of thought in my field about what makes content work, and I absorbed it completely. I built an entire intellectual framework around it. I could argue for it. I could cite examples. I could make the case. And when I encountered evidence that contradicted it, I didn't engage with the evidence honestly. I dismissed it. That's not a real test. I think of myself as someone who thinks critically, someone who questions authority, someone who seeks out different perspectives. And because I think this about myself, I don't actually examine whether it's true. I've assumed I'm exempt from this trap, which means I'm more vulnerable to it than someone who's paying attention. The moment you think you can't be caught is the moment you're most caught, because you stop watching yourself. So let me ask you the question Bonhoeffer would ask. In what areas of your life have you surrendered your independence without noticing? What beliefs do you hold that you've never actually chosen, that you inherited from people you trust? What opinions do you defend that, if you're honest, you absorbed from groups you're part of? What facts do you dismiss because they contradict your sense of belonging? Don't answer this out loud. Sit with it. Because once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. You become aware of it in real time. You start noticing when your brain is rationalizing away contradictions, when your intelligence is being used to defend irrationality, when belonging is trumping truth. There are some specific markers that show when you've been caught. I'm going to list them, but I want you to listen not as accusations against other people. Listen as a mirror. First marker. You defend a belief even when presented with direct contradiction, and you don't engage with the contradiction. You dismiss it. That's not a real source. That's taken out of context. That's not actually what happened. Notice, you're not defending the belief logically. You're defending membership in the group that holds the belief. When did I last do this? Recently. When someone questioned something I believe, my first instinct was to dismiss the question, not to examine it. Second marker. Your commitment to a group or ideology increases even as the group's behavior becomes more obviously harmful. The normal response is, if my group did that, I need to reconsider my commitment. The stupid response is, my group did that, therefore it must have been justified. Intelligence gets mobilized to defend indefensible behavior. I've watched this in real time. I've seen myself do it. Third marker. You refuse to even consider perspectives from outside your group. Not because you've evaluated them and rejected them, but because you preemptively dismiss them as biased or evil or naive. You're not thinking, you're screening. Fourth marker. Your sense of identity is completely fused with a political position, a religious view, or a group membership. Remove the position, and there's no self left. That fusion is the sign that independence has been surrendered. Fifth marker. You experience threat or anger when your beliefs are questioned, even gently. This isn't a sign you think the person is wrong. It's a sign you feel your belonging is being attacked. If you recognize these patterns in yourself, and if you're honest, you have a chance to do something about it. You have a chance to notice when it's happening. And that's the first step toward actually being free. Here's where Bonhoeffer gets bleak. He argued that stupidity cannot be overcome through instruction. You cannot teach someone out of it. Because the problem isn't a lack of information. The problem is a surrendered will. It can only be overcome through liberation. Not intellectual liberation, internal liberation. The ability to think independently again requires breaking free from the systems that captured your thinking in the first place. And that's terrifyingly hard, because it means accepting social consequences. It means risking your community, your identity, your sense of belonging. It means having conversations where you might be alone. It means being willing to be wrong, being willing to change your mind about things you've built your identity around. And maybe most frightening, accepting that you might have been wrong about important things for a long time. Most people won't do this, not because they're intellectually incapable, but because the cost is too high. The social cost, the identity cost, the relationship cost. This is why Bonhoeffer's observation is so bleak. The only antidote requires something most people are unwilling to sacrifice. Freedom, it turns out, is expensive. I want to tell you about a moment where I actually chose liberation. Because theory is cheap. Proof is what matters. There's this creative principle I've built my entire approach around. I've defended it in conversations. I've written about it. I've used it to evaluate other people's work. And last year, I encountered something that contradicted it completely. A creator I respect made work that violated every principle I believed in. And it worked. It worked really well. And I had a choice. I could rationalize it. I could say, well, that's an exception, or they're doing it in a special context, or that's not actually what's happening. All the intellectual moves were available to me. Or I could actually look at the evidence. I chose to look. And what I found was uncomfortable. I found that my principle was too narrow. I got to engage with ideas on their merit instead of whether they threatened my identity. And I got to experience something I hadn't felt in a long time, intellectual freedom. That's the proof. Liberation is real. It's just expensive. And now, when someone challenges something I believe, my first instinct is different. It's not defensiveness, it's curiosity. Not, how do I defend this, but is this actually true? And that shift, that simple shift in how I approach disagreement, it changed everything. Because I'm not captured anymore. I can think. So if the problem is a surrendered will, what does reclamation look like practically? Bonhoeffer was clear that this isn't a quick fix. It's a reorientation of the entire self. But it starts with small acts. Deliberate, uncomfortable, small acts. First, deliberately engage with ideas outside your group, not to be converted, not to find ammunition against them, but to genuinely understand how intelligent people can believe differently than your group. This reminds your brain that complexity exists, that smart people disagree, that no group has monopoly on truth. I did this. I read extensively from people I fundamentally disagree with, not the straw man versions, the actual strongest thinkers in their tradition. And something shifted. I realized, oh, these people aren't stupid. They've just evaluated the same evidence differently and arrived at different conclusions. That realization changed how I approach disagreement. Second, practice disagreement within your group. Start small. Find something you genuinely disagree with and say it. Quietly at first, if that's what's needed, but say it. Notice what happens. Does the group tolerate disagreement, or does it move to exile you? That tells you everything about whether the group is actually committed to truth or just to conformity. Third, stop using your intelligence to defend things you're not sure about. When you find yourself constructing an argument for something, pause. Ask yourself, am I thinking this way because I've independently evaluated the evidence and come to this conclusion? Or am I thinking this way because my group thinks it and I've been mobilized to defend it? Be honest. Fourth, actively seek out the strongest version of arguments against things you believe. Not the straw man versions, not the weakest critique, the strongest, most intelligent critique from people who actually hold the opposing view. If your beliefs can't survive engagement with the strongest opposition, they're not worth holding. And fifth, get comfortable with uncertainty. You don't have to believe everything your group believes. You don't have to have a firm position on every issue. Saying, I don't know, and I'm still thinking about that, are signs of real independence, not weakness. They're signs that you're thinking, not defending. There's something I want you to understand about all of this. Bonhoeffer wrote this during the collapse of a civilization. He was imprisoned for his resistance. He was trying to understand how intelligent people could participate in atrocity. And his conclusion was, intelligent people are the most dangerous when they've surrendered their autonomy. Because you have the intellectual capacity to rationalize anything, you can construct arguments for the indefensible. You can make evil sound reasonable. And that's not a historical problem. That's a current problem. The more polarized your culture becomes, the more Bonhoeffer's theory becomes relevant. Because polarization is basically a system that's optimized for surrendering independence. You pick a tribe. You adopt their entire belief portfolio. You defend it against all opposition. The tribe makes sure there's a social cost to leaving. In this environment, stupidity isn't a bug, it's a feature. The system requires it. Which is why reasoning someone out of polarized positions is so difficult. You're not fighting their intellect, you're fighting their sense of belonging. And belonging matters more to human brains than truth. Here's the question Bonhoeffer wants to leave you with. The moment you think you're immune to this is the moment you're most vulnerable. The people most captured by systems are often the ones who think they're thinking freely. They're well-read, they've heard opposing arguments, they think they've chosen their views independently. But they haven't. They've rationalized them. And the rationalization is so sophisticated, it feels like independent thinking. So the real question isn't whether Bonhoeffer's theory is true. It obviously is. The real question is, will you notice when it's happening to you? Can you develop the self-awareness to catch yourself rationalizing instead of thinking? To catch yourself defending belonging instead of truth? To catch yourself using intelligence as a tool of conformity instead of liberation? Because that's where freedom actually lives. Not in being right about everything, but in being willing to be wrong. Not in perfect adherence to a belief system, but in constant questioning of whether you chose your beliefs or inherited them. Not in the comfort of belonging, but in the harder work of thinking for yourself. So I want to leave you with this. The next time you encounter someone doing something stupid, acting against their own interests, defending something indefensible, believing something that makes no sense, don't assume they're intellectually deficient. Assume they've surrendered something else. Their autonomy, their independence, their willingness to think alone. And then, and this is the hard part, ask yourself, where have I done the same? Where am I defending what I haven't chosen? Where am I rationalizing instead of thinking? Where is my intelligence being used against my truth? That's the real insight of Bonhoeffer. Not that some people are stupid, but that we're all at risk of becoming stupid. The moment we mistake belonging for truth, the moment we prioritize group loyalty over independent thought, the moment we let our intelligence become a tool of rationalization instead of liberation, that's when stupidity isn't just a possibility, it's a certainty.